This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlina, and I'll be your host. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe on iTunes, or you can visit odatchat.com and join my email list, and I'll send you episodes right to your inbox. This is a podcast where my guests and I talk about our recovery. We largely focus on unpacking the issues that cause addiction and how it affects us and our family, but mostly on solutions, including the 12 steps. We talk about all kinds of books and ideas and teachings that contribute to long-term recovery. The goal really is to break the stigma of addiction and offer hope to those still suffering. And today's episode is with my dear friend Brian. God, he is so funny. I apologize. I'm totally giggling in the beginning. But, what you're about to hear is a perfect example of the power of recovery. Brian embodies what is commonly referred to as the Jekyll and Hyde effect, and it was so strange to hear him tell the stories of his past and then try to reconcile, the man that sat before me, because I know Brian to be a very kind and loving and caring person, and the person he describes was not that. So, Brian gets asked to speak all the time because he has such a powerful and moving message. So I was so grateful that he was able to join me on the podcast. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And with that, please enjoy this episode with Brian. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's my honor.
So we are having a heat wave. So I appreciate you being willing to sit in my hot-ass studio to do this.
Well, I was once handcuffed and forced to, sit on a concrete bench for 8.5 hours with no AC in Wichita, Kansas at one time. So.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
this is okay. I'll take this.
You've done worse.
Yes. Yeah. You can power through this.
Power through this.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what I typically do is I start with a little bit of background so people listening can get an idea of who you are, and we'll certainly post a picture of you on the website when we publish this. But just give me a little background. Like, how old are you? What do you do professionally?
I am 46 years old. I am a technical recruiter at a company, and
technical recruiter in Silicon Valley. How weird!
Yeah.
How unusual!
Yeah, it's, no shortage of people to pick from. So, and the company I work for is just unbelievably cool. It's not like a storage company like Storage Wars. It's a data storage company.
Right,
so
storage.
I should probably clear that up. But yeah. So
excellent. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been at this company about 1.5 years now.
Okay, nice. And you mentioned spending some time in Wichita, Kansas. Where are you from originally?
Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, that's where you're from.
My dad was in the Air Force, and so we bounced around for a little bit. But in 77 or 78, that's where we kind of hung our hat.
All right. Put some roots down.
Of all places.
Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
You seem super stoked about it.
Yeah.
Hence residence in California.
Well, they have that saying, if you have a week to live, move to Kansas, because every minute seems like a fucking eternity. So it's that's not
untrue.
No,
okay,
it's
no,
not.
No offense, Wichita, Kansas.
No, there's offense.
You're like, I am never going back.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about your family of origin. So your dad was in the Army?
He's in the Air Force.
Air Force, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a brother, right?
I do. I have a younger brother.
He's younger. No sisters? It's just
I have a half-sister.
Right.
Older half-sister that, just don't know much about. I know her. But
you do know her?
Yeah, we've seen each other probably 10 times in my life.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay. And what about your mom?
My mom, she lives in Oregon.
Right. I've met your mom. She's really sweet.
Yeah. Mom lives in Oregon. Parents got divorced when I was 13 in Kansas, and so.
That's a rough age to go through a divorce as a kid.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I started drinking too. So it was just a bad time for the the hammer to leave the house, because then I started acting out.
Your mom was the hammer?
My dad was, and then
he left.
Yeah, and so.
Okay. For some reason, I always thought that you grew up with your dad.
Well, eventually I had to, because my mom couldn't handle me. So she told me that I had to move with my father. So
how old were you when that happened?
I think it was my freshman year
of high school.
Yeah. So I had to go move in with him because he couldn't. She
couldn't deal anymore.
Yeah, just
couldn't handle you.
Running amok.
Yeah, no, boys are. Thank God. Bob and I are still married because we have 2 teenage boys. Mm-hmm. Travis just turned 17, and he's a sweet kid. But every once in a while, he'll give me a little sass, and I'm like, Dad.
Right.
Yeah. It helps to have.
That's pretty much what happened. And my mom and I have always been super close.
Yeah.
And I just turned on her.
Yeah.
And it was weird to see how that relationship kind of turned, right? Because she had always been, there was my father and I who never got along, and I really didn't, it was just a strained relationship. And my mother, I always leaned on her, but she, as a kid, I felt like she leaned on me too. And so.
In what way?
Just.
Well, she was alone with 2 kids. So.
Well, I mean, even when they were married, we were just super close, right? And I just kind of, I think I remember her telling me things that nobody else knew, like, I'm going to leave your dad, and just kind of like, but don't say anything. And,
well, you should be 13 years old.
Well, not older, because they would do this yo-yo game of like, I'm divorcing, then they'd get back together and try it, but we've always been close, and it just, I don't know, we just had that thing, but I don't remember, I don't know, it was just a weird time.
Yeah, I think that's hard when the parent is kind of reliant on the child sometimes.
Yeah, and she was trying to find her way too. I mean, one of the reasons that they were divorcing is because my mom wanted to, she was starting to find herself, and she wanted to go to festivals and meet friends, and my dad was very rigid. We got a house.
Military.
And we got a fixer-upper of a house, and so it was, we work all, the parents worked all week, and then on the weekends we fixed the house. And Mom was like, I want to start going out and meeting friends and play. And and my dad was not so keen on that. And so she was finding her way, right? And so until she found, her groove, it was just kind of leaned on me a little bit. And, I remember a couple of times I got called when things were rough for her. And
would she vent?
Yeah.
But some things she probably should have shared with a girlfriend, not her.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I felt like I was just a sounding board. I think she was just getting it out, like crying and just, so.
Oh, it's hard to watch a mama cry.
Yeah, it is.
That's hard. Okay, so, but she didn't have that you were the older child, so do you feel like she leaned on your brother too? Or?
No, not that I could see.
How much younger is your brother?
He's about 2.5 years younger than me.
Younger than you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
But you definitely had that older sibling relationship with your mom.
Yeah.
So when do you remember your first drink?
Mm-hmm.
Was that how you started using? Was drinking, or was it something else?
It was drinking.
It was drinking. Okay, you started with drinking. Do you remember your first one?
I remember my first drunk.
Yeah. What was that like?
So I was in the 7th grade, and I was hanging out with, I was going to this new junior high school, and it just so happened that there was a 9th grader there named Mike Jones, and my family knew his family from playing softball. My dad played softball with his dad, so we knew each other. Mm-hmm. And they were a good family, and so I didn't know anybody going into this junior high school, and but I saw Mike, and so I glommed onto Mike, and he was this stud athlete, straight A's, good-looking guy. All the girls loved him, and so I just kind of followed him around like a puppy dog. And
was he older than you?
He was in the 9th. He was a freshman. I was a 7th grader.
Oh,
and so,
wow!
And that created a pattern, right? Because that kind of mirrored how I always had friends. They always had to, for some reason, be older than me. Then I didn't hang out with too many people that were my age, but there were some, but not a lot. And if I did, they were usually bigger. I felt like I needed to be protected because I was a shit talker, and either they'd, every once in a while they'd let me get beat up because it was like you needed to, but then there would be, most of the time they would handle it for me, right? Because I was their boy, right? And I so anyway, Mike and I got to be really close, and I found myself staying at their place a lot because I hated staying at my house, and so my parents would let me stay over there because they knew the family, and we had this big event planned that we were going to get Brian drunk, and
really?
so we got into they bought a 6-pack of Michelob Lights, and in the back of the Monte Carlo, they gave me 3, and they said, drink them. And I said, okay. And they go, go, drink.
Geez,
and I did it. And first one, and then the second one, and the third one. And man, I was flying. Oof. And to date myself, from there we went to the roller rink. And man,
the 4 wheels,
and the little stopper, and not that I got on them at that particular night, but that's where everybody went. And I'm telling you, I was talking to all the 9th grade honeys. I was like, "What's up?" And I I was talking to everybody, and they were all laughing at me, and I was and then I don't remember anything after that. Right, I got blacked out.
Oh my. Blacked out the first time.
Yeah, and then when I woke up, I was in his attic because his parents had remodeled it and put some beds up there because they let a lot of people stay at their place because they were just cool like that. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I'd pissed all over myself.
That's a rough start to drinking. Blacking out and busy.
Yeah, and I was scared because I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to make a scene, and so
right.
and so I just.
Did you think maybe it was something else?
No, I kind of knew. I mean, and so
you were at that age.
I just went back to sleep. I was like, I'm not going to try to, because it was dark. I didn't know the attic. I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, what. And
you sucked in your own piss.
I did. It was awesome. And so so I got up in the morning, and Mike's older brother Stan was sleeping, and I was still drunk. I think I just and I stumbled out, and I just fell flat on him, but my crotch fell on his head with the pit. Yeah, and he was a big guy, and he just flew me off of him, and I was just like, oh, what happened? And I'm just super sweaty. So yeah, and I did the walk of shame down to the bathroom, and just at 7th grade I was experiencing that. But,
oh, that is horrible.
Yeah, and I wanted to do that again, minus the whole pissing part. I mean,
next time I'll do it different.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was going to do that different. I just didn't know that. It was just interesting. I don't know. I felt so free. Like, wow, nothing was holding me back. Right. It's just like the governor was off, and I was able to just blah. And I kind of figured that I could, I got a lot of attention, and I loved it.
That's interesting. Freedom, attention, and it really sounds like it's like a freedom of fear. Like you lost your self-consciousness, and then you could just do whatever. Not afraid to talk to
because I was the only 7th grader that was hanging around with the 9th graders because of Mike,
cool.
And then, but I was always this little quiet, and I was a little comedian kid, and but still 7th grade. But that night I was different, right?
And everybody was talking about it.
And they were laughing at me, and I became that. What it morphed into was, did you hear what Brian did last night, guy? Right? Because I'd get to go to the parties with Mike, and I'd get to, and I became known as that.
You were the fucking
kid.
Circus clown.
Right. Just give Brian some fucking beer and watch him, and I'm like, oh.
You're like the entertainment.
Meanwhile, I'm just trying to get laid, right?
Which is not. How did that go? Did you ever?
I did, yeah.
Because other girls were getting drunk. Were you sleeping with the older girls? Or?
I lost my virginity to an 8th grader when I was in the 7th grade, and
wow,
so
that's kind of impressive.
Well, it was at the time. I mean, and what I found,
that's young.
I became really good at. I was a chameleon, right? Mm-hmm. Like Mike was a jock, straight A's, honor roll, but she was a headbanger, right? She was a stoner chick, and she was kind of on the out. But I just met her, and then I started hanging out with the stoners, and then I was able to just juggle my time between Mike and the stoners, and then there was I hung out with all the brothers too. I mean, because I was just I made myself kind of known everywhere, right?
You were friends with everybody.
I was mm-hmm. Just for whatever reason. I just
everybody liked being around you,
mm-hmm. and I felt like that, and I was just known in all the circles, right? And I inserted myself in those circles, and I don't.
You're a people person.
I don't know what purpose that was serving, but I think it made me comfortable to know that wherever I went, I knew somebody. Mm-hmm.
But you really do like people.
I do.
Yeah. So you're making friends with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. So, where did things start to go sideways? Because it sounds like that was a lot of fun with a little bit of problems mixed in there. Did you have any like close calls with the police early on?
No, not until so the next year, my 8th grade year, I was hanging out with this guy, and I would skip school with him. And by then, Mike had gone, right? He'd gone to a sophomore. And so when you're a sophomore, you go to high school, right? You stay out of the junior high, right?
Okay.
And so I started, I got really close with this guy named Jason and his older brother, but Tim was the same age as Mike. But Jason was 1 year older than me. And so him and I got to hang out a lot. And he replaced Mike. And he was another stud athlete, honor roll.
You know how to pick him.
Yeah. And he was just a role model, right? But... they also drank, and I just, insert Jason where Mike was, right? And so I hung out with all the 9th graders when I was in the 8th grade, right? But there was this kid that I was hanging around with too, one of the stoners, and he gypped a lot, and skipped school, and so I'd hang out with him. And something happened. I remember I was able to stay the night over at Mike Jones' house one night, because I hadn't seen him in a while, and so I went over there, and I was really struggling with the abandonment of him being gone.
Oh, we felt like he abandoned you?
Yeah, because it's just like all contact was gone, right? Because we hung out during the summer before he went into a sophomore year, and then sophomore year he was just like doing high school stuff, right? And here I am stuck in junior high, and the schools were attached, and the only thing that connected them was a cafeteria. So I would skip school to try to find him during his lunch period, but they could leave, and so I could never find him, and I was like this little guy looking, and so that's why I glommed onto Jason, right? And Jason has still like a lifetime friend, But
what happened to Mike? Did you?
I'm still in touch. I mean, I know where he is. He's in Kansas City. I even made amends to him. I went to Kansas City and made amends. Yeah.
Did you ever express to him how, like, at the time that you were really
no
bummed?
No,
because it wasn't you. Couldn't.
No, I was just I was an asshole to him, right? I mean,
and
to his family.
You got mad at him
because he was living his life, and I was just like, I can't believe, why can't I be included? And he was just growing up, he started hanging out with seniors, because he was.
He wanted to do the same thing you were doing.
Well, he was a stud athlete, so as a sophomore. They wanted him, right? So those seniors who were stud athletes and were recruiting Mike, and he fit right in, right? And he was just as good as them at that level, and he was 2 years younger. He was just that good, and so I went over to their house because I started hanging around with this other kid. Jason was a good one. Then there was another Jason that was the headbanger, and it was the stoner crew, right? And I went over to Mike's house, and his dad Ken said, "Hey, why are you walking around my house with your head hanging down?" I said, what do you mean? He goes, I've seen you for 2 days, because I stayed over there for 2 days, right? And he goes, you haven't looked anybody in the eye.
Oh.
And he goes, what is that? What's that all about? I don't know. And he goes, you seem different.
Uh-oh.
And since I've been sober, I've had time to reflect on that, right? That's when I started there was an uptick in everything that I was doing, because I started to skip school more, and I was, starting to smoke weed, and I was drinking as much as as much as I could without getting caught, but the frequency of it was happening a lot on the weekends, a lot more. And, but I think that was somewhat of a turning point, because I had a hard time looking at people in the eyes from that, and I didn't even realize it, but I would just walk and I'd have my head hanging.
Was it because you felt bad about the things you were doing?
I think so, right?
You didn't realize it?
Yeah, I think my self-worth started to kind of deteriorate, right? Because I wanted to be in athletics, but I didn't, everybody else was growing and got faster, and I didn't, but I wanted to write about it. I thought, well, shit, I can just be a fucking sports writer. That would be killer.
Yeah.
But then I just was skipping school, and my because I was honor roll, honorable mention, and then it just started to dink, and then back then I started getting spankings by the vice principal, and
they could hit you in school.
Oh yeah, Mr. Tehran, he used to have this paddle, and it was holes in it, and just boom, and
he would hit you. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a trip.
Yeah.
I mean,
detentions. Right.
That shit does not fly here.
It doesn't, but it did there.
Was it like a religious school or just a regular public school?
Public school.
That's bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're getting beat at school.
Yeah.
Not great for the self-esteem. It's like a vicious spiral, right?
I mean, maybe Mr. Trend came in and took place of my dad, because my dad was gone at that point.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, could be. Attention seeking, I'll get it any way I can, good or bad. I don't know. But, even in school, my... Did you hear what Brian did last night? Guy at parties now became, did you hear what Brian did in school?
Okay.
Right.
It was accelerating.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Everything accelerates.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I had to go to, and then that's when my mom said I can't handle him, and I had to go live with my dad during this. I started during the summer of going into my 9th grade year, and so I had to go to a whole nother school where I didn't know anybody. And
you had to switch schools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they lived in different cities, or what was it?
Same city, different district.
Okay, so you had to switch schools.
Mm-hmm.
That is so hard to switch schools at that age. Mm-hmm. So did you have no friends at the other school?
I didn't know one person.
And you had no... Oh, that is rough.
And
I did that in high school. That
it's
sucks.
Not cool. And I got in a fight on the first day.
On the first day with who?
This guy named OC.
Did he seek you out and pick on you?
Mm-hmm.
Made an example of you?
So, yeah, we were in the bus, right? And it was after school. And he came up to me and he said, "Get out of my seat." And I knew what he meant by saying, "Get out of my seat," right? So there's two things that are going to happen.
Okay.
I'm going to get out of his seat, and then everybody's going to think that I'm a punk.
Right.
Or I'm going to fight this guy, and I'm not going to be a punk, right? And so we fought.
So it's kind of like prison.
Kind of, right? And and so we fought, and I did not lose.
He was older or younger?
He was my age, but he was bigger, right? Okay. But I mean, I wasn't going to be looked at in that light, especially in a new school, right? And so
it's a bad first
and we actually became friends, right? Because I think that showed, like, okay, and
respect.
This was like a predominantly black school, and so
it was?
yeah, and so that was just, I also,
was he black?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
OC.
Okay. Oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah. And those were my friends, right? I mean, and that's just who I played basketball with, and they were my best friends. Their families knew me, and I was kind of like the token white guy, right? and their vernacular became a part of mine, right? And they became my closest friends. I mean, growing up, my best friend Sean Woody, he was a black guy, and his family, who I still call moms. I mean, we love each other. We still talk. I mean, she's like my mother, right? But I call her moms rather than mom. But I mean,
your second mom.
Yeah, I mean, I met him in grade school, and so that was my first introduction into this new school on that day, and I, got that reputation that at least he's not a punk, right? So yeah.
I guess that's not a bad thing that you got in a fight the first day.
No.
At least everybody knew about you.
I mean, at least in that light, rather than the one before, right?
Yeah.
Dance monkey, right? So,
what do they call those little monkeys with the little
the little Italian guys. Yeah. You throw peanuts and he's like that, right?
The little organ grinder. Monkey.
Yes.
That's a little symbolism.
Right? That's me. That was me. Except that day, I was not.
Okay, so you got to leave organ grinding monkey Brian behind, and now you were badass Brian. With the brothers and did we call them that?
My boys, yeah. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
And so now you're entering high school, so this is a whole new phase. And are they smoking weed and drinking, these particular friends?
Well, I didn't really hang out with them because all of my friends were back at the other junior high school, and so I'd go there during the week, and so my dad would give me, I think, like $5 a day for lunch, and I would never eat lunch. I would just play basketball and save the money. And then on the weekends, I would go out with my old friends from the other side of the city.
Go visit.
They'd come pick me up.
Oh, would you go visit your mom on the weekends?
I don't know I can't remember if she was still in Wichita or. I don't remember that much. I think I was just with my dad. But I think they had tried. No, they moved. They got back together. I think at that point they tried to make it work. So yeah, we lived in a duplex.
But different school, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but your old friends would come get you on the weekend.
Yeah,
and you're spending your lunch money on. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have $25 to go out on the weekend, and that was good for.
A lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was good for a ninth grader.
For a kid. Yeah.
And so I would just hang out with them, and it was that Jason kid, the athletic honor roll student, hang out with him and his older brother, and just the other side of the city. Friends, right?
Okay. So, but when did things? So it sounds like you started getting into a little bit of trouble enough to where you had to go live with your dad. And when did you start getting into like trouble with the police or?
Sophomore.
Okay, so shortly after you moved.
Yeah. I was living with my dad. My mom had moved out, and we actually got a house. And my mom, she moved to California.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So they bought a house, and then she moved, and I remember her leaving, and and I was just like, okay, I see you, acting as if she was going to be home when I got back from school, right? I was like, okay, bye. And she wasn't, and so
she had left and come back so many times.
Not the state. Right?
A little bit different.
Yeah, this is a little, and so
maybe we're in denial about her.
Oh well, yeah, that mirrored a lot of that. That because I became hardened to like people leaving my life, right? Because there was Sean Woody who moved, to Oklahoma. There was Mike who moved on to high school, and then finally I just was like shutting the door on people, right? I was just like, okay, bye. Well, acting as if, right? Just like I'll still see you tomorrow, right? And then they wouldn't be here, and I would just kind of like block it out and plod on with my life.
Okay, just shove that shit down.
Yeah.
All the sadness or all the
sadness is what it was, right? And Mom, right?
Yeah.
And Mike, that was sad. And
the people that you loved, and that's hard. I always think about origins of addiction. Do you think that's part of like the origins of your addiction? Do you think that's why you drank? You had all this sadness bottled up, and then
my grandmother asked me that when she came out and visited me after I got sober, and she said, she asked me if I thought I was born an alcoholic, and I said, I don't know, but I do know that when I had those first beers with Mike Jones, an alcoholic was born.
No shit. Huh?
Right? So
out from
I'm not so sure that if, I grew up in a household where my parents were just like Ozzie and Harriet and everything was fine, if I wouldn't have turned out the same way, because I just couldn't. Okay. I mean, it was like something changed inside of me, right? Where I started to seek other areas of my life when my parents were still together, right? So I mean, it's not like it was, that happened and then I thought, right.
It wasn't like childhood trauma.
Yeah, that was just might have been fanning the flames, but
it's interesting how some people just react that way from the gate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I blacked out my very first time drinking, and it was on from the gate.
Yeah,
and I was like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Actually, it's probably younger than that, but I can't wrap my head around blacking out at 8.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think most people would laugh. Isn't it funny how we think that's funny?
Well, now.
Looking back, we're like, I was 8 years old blacking out.
Yeah.
We're kind of twisted. A twisted community. Okay, so you were saying in junior highs when you started having some legal trouble. What happened the first time?
Well, as a sophomore, my dad had 2 rules that he was really pretty. He wanted me to come home. He wanted me to go to school.
Weird.
Yeah, and I just was like,
so unreasonable.
Fuck you, And he said, then you can leave, right? And so I did. And
at how old? At sophomore? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I moved.
Were you like 16 years old?
Yeah, I left.
You're like later.
And I screw you. And and my friends came pick me up, and it didn't dawn on me the heaviness of what was happening until they said, "Hey, Brian, where are we taking you? Because we got to go home." I said, "Well, what? I can't hang with you?" And they're like, "No, dude, you can't come over to my house, right?" And I was like, "Oh, but I was not going to go home. I was not going to go home and screw him, right? Right." And so I stayed out on the streets for a while. I mean, like 3 or 4 months. And I mean, I could pop into some places, but it was winter in Kansas, and it sucked. And so I'd stay in apartment complexes, like under their stairs, because it was inside, so they were heated, and sometimes I'd stay in washer and dryer facilities in the apartment complexes they had there. So
16.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I mean,
that's so sad. I mean, I have kids that are older than that. I can't imagine not knowing where my child was at night.
Well, I'm sure it was probably pretty rough for my dad.
Yeah.
Or and my mom.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, your mom.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So.
And so you did that for how long?
3 or 4 months, and then I got.
That's an entire winter.
Yeah, and then I got arrested because I had stole my dad's computer.
You broke into his house and stole his computer.
Mm-hmm. And
how did they find you?
It was just I don't know. They did. I mean, people talk, right? I mean, it was just like,
Small
I sold
town.
it to some guy, some engineer at Wichita State who dealt weed. And I was just like, he gave me money and weed. And somehow it got back to that I did it. And then it was just like, I mean, they just went to my friends. Oh, he's staying over here. Oh, he's staying with Mark. He's staying. And then they just found me, right? And so I got my first trip to jail, and with the promise of, Dad, I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. And then and then I got in trouble again, and then I got arrested again, and then. But as I was going to jail, I started to hear things, like
What things?
well, just how to play the system.
You learned how to be a better criminal.
Well, that, yeah.
Or
I mean,
a criminal.
Yes, and I also heard that if you told the judge that you have a drug and alcohol problem, they'll lighten your sentence.
Okay.
And so I did.
Okay.
And they put me into my first treatment facility.
At how old?
It's sophomore, I think. It was sophomore.
Oh wow, you went downhill fast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it might have been the beginning of my junior year, and because I didn't make it out of my junior year of school, so yeah.
Oh, you didn't?
Mm-mm.
Did you get your GED after? So you didn't graduate and all that?
Oh no, no.
You're like, don't be ridiculous.
No. That wasn't happening. I mean, I went from, even in ninth grade, I think I was managing honorable mention, just on the edges or a little below that. But then
So
when
you
I
were
got
a smart kid.
yeah, I could do the work. I mean, but
once, it sounds like the progression of drugs and alcohol just took you out.
that and that fuck it switch was really loud in my voice, right? I mean, just because, and then when I became a sophomore, people had cars.
Oh, yeah.
Ninth grade, nobody had cars. We were all either bussed in or they walked to school. Sophomore, people had cars. And so it was just a matter of me glomming on to whoever wasn't going to go to class and then it was just like a whole nother set of friends that I was just developing, right?
Right.
But, I mean, they had the ability to just miss one class and then go back, whereas I was like, why? Why go back, right? You guys are stupid, right?
We escaped.
Yeah, and Miss Jeffries was our security guard, and she'd always go, Lancaster, get in here! I'm like, no!
No.
She was old, she couldn't catch me, but, I mean, I would get in trouble. And my MO was to just, if I knew I was caught, I just wouldn't go back.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's the same that at my dad's house. I'd get caught, I'd go steal his cars, and I'd drive up, and the police would be there, and then I would just drive off in his car. I mean, and then I would just never go home, right? I would just leave his car. One time I left his Corvette at a convenience store, and I put the keys in a payphone booth. And I just left. I said, I'm not... Yeah.
Not taking the rap for that.
Well, they knew it was me because they were there looking for me. And I pulled up and he lived in a court and I saw the cops and I was like, oh. And I just, my grandfather saw me one time riding around, joyriding in his car. And I was with Larry Matthews and we pulled right up next to him and I was like, hey, Larry, watch me pass his Cadillac. And I went and it was my grandpa. And I got so scared. I hit the curb and he had like these alloy wheels. And I scraped them all up. My grandparents came over and ran home. Me and Larry were just in the backyard. And I was like, act like nothing. My grandparents came over and said, did you take your dad's Corvette? And of course, no. And my grandma said, I can fry an egg on that hood right now, right? Because it's so hot, right? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then, because my dad was out of town all the time. And so, because when he retired, he landed a job with this construction company. And so he traveled a lot. And so I just ran crazy. So that's why I was doing that stuff, right? And so before he came home, I would just leave again. And, if I got in trouble or if I was really in a bad way, I'd plead to his, dad's side of like, dude, I'm just in such a bad space. Can you please let me come back home? And then I would just burn that again. And so.
And then eventually you left home for good?
No. I mean, So
you were just always back and...
Yeah, back and forth.
Bouncing in and out. Yeah, that must have been hard for your dad.
Yeah, no, it really was. I mean,
He must be so glad you're sober.
Just to, and my dad and I have admittedly always had a strained relationship, and that's just what it is. But at the same time, that man did everything that he could for me, right? And so, whether I still have like daddy issues, because I know I do, but I can't imagine anybody putting somebody through what I put my father through, right? I mean, being out of town and just that constant wonder, is my house being raided? Because I used to have parties of 50 or 60 people there, and my neighbors would come over because my dad said, watch my house. And I'd get in fight with the neighbors saying, I'll kill you, don't you ever come over to my house. Yeah. And I was terrorizing the neighborhood, right? And it was just...
That seems so out of character. I mean, that is not the Brian I know today.
Yeah. Good.
There's a reason we don't drink and use anymore.
Yeah.
Jekyll and Hyde, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so crazy. And I've heard you tell some crazy stories. We were doing a little segment called Naked or Vegas, and I'm sure... Did you ever make it to Vegas? Loaded?
So, funny story. Well, the beginning isn't fun. I don't know if it's funny or not, but my grandfather had surgery in Arizona, heart surgery. It was a simple procedure, and some bacteria got in his blood,
Ooh,
and
that's not good.
He wasn't going to make it. So my grandmother kind of requested everybody come down, and me and my girlfriend at the time flew down there, and they decided that they were going to pull the plug. And I disagreed with it because, who knows, maybe he'll pull out of it. And so I was just like, fuck you, family, my opinion doesn't matter, because I was really the only one, and he wasn't going to make it. And so, I left the hospital. I saw him from a distance because I didn't want to see him that way. I didn't want to have that be my last memory, right? But everybody else went, so I was detached from the family, right? And so me and my girlfriend, Kathy, went out, and we got drunk, and I don't, at a certain point I blacked out, and I remember coming to in the hotel room, and security had come because we were fighting, and I guess I was throwing her around, and they came up, and she was like, oh, nothing's happening, we're just messing around. They're like, you guys sound like you're yelling, and we didn't get any trouble, and that night, there was periods of that I do remember, but most I don't. But I remember saying this to Kathy. I proposed to her.
Of course.
And I said,
so romantic.
I said, hey, one great life is lost in Papa Al. Why don't we go start one life together, right? And so
wow, you are romantic.
We got on a plane to Vegas, and
you didn't.
And I don't remember much. I'd been out in I'd been out in California for a while, and my Kansas friends were distant past, right? But I was there, and I have pictures to prove this, and that's the only. But apparently, I saw some high school friends there, and we hung out and partied, and I guess I got in a fight, and there was just all this stuff that had happened, but I also got married in Vegas. And so I don't remember any of this. And so when I came to, I was back in San Jose, and I don't remember any of that, right? So I don't remember, there's nothing that I remember of that, except I do know that I woke up in San Jose, back in our apartment.
And you were married.
And there was a bucket, like a big ice cream bucket, but it was the ones that you get in Vegas for the coins, and it was full of quarters. Oh. And a marriage license. And an audio tape. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? And there it was, marriage certificate. And I'm like, this must have been a joke. And then... Did
you have a ring on?
No, I don't know. and there was an audio tape of us getting married. And you couldn't make out what I was saying, so I didn't know if that could hold up. Yeah. It was just just blathering, right? And we got married.
Are you still married?
Not to her. No, 6 months later, she hit me with a car. So, yeah.
On purpose?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite the Vegas story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought that was passion. That's what I considered love and passion. It's
so misguided.
Yeah. But that was the world I lived in, man. It didn't seem wrong, right?
Seemed perfectly reasonable at the time.
Yeah, I get it. I get why you would want to do that to me. It's cool because I didn't want her to get in trouble because she was my hostage.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can't let her go.
Hence,
right?
hostage.
Misery loves company, right? And
whether they want to be there or not.
Right.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you guys have kids?
No.
Okay, thank God.
No, she had 2 kids that saw all this.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's her bad.
Yeah. And
that was her job. She fucked up.
Yeah. And, and I was terrible to those kids. And
you were?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
Oh, I was mean. One time I came home drunk, and I just destroyed the whole apartment, and she had him huddled over in the corner, and I came out of the blackout, and I remember Alexander looking over at me with tears in his eyes saying, "Why is he doing this, Mommy?" And I mean, I just like threw lamps, chairs, table. I mean, it was just a mess. And, you know, the next morning I was pissed because nobody cleaned it up, right? You know,
my goodness.
And so that's how I treated them, right? They were just an inconvenience to me. And so, yeah.
Wow. Talk about a Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
That is not the Brian I know today. So let's just fast forward. Tell me about, because I've heard you tell the stories, you know, about you were facing some serious prison time. What led up to that? And then what was because it sounds like that was your bottom, but can you just walk me through that part that eventually led you to getting sober?
Could
you please pour out like the worst possible fucking thing that happened to you for the enjoyment of my audience? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, So Kathy and I lived in an apartment on Meridian.
Local.
And right across from that, Wiener Schnitzel.
Okay.
And when we got evicted from our apartment, I had like $5,000 in my pocket. I couldn't pay $900 a month in rent because I just, you know, I was selling meth, and I was, you know, I was a dealer, and you know, doing everything that I had done up to that point. I decided that I had wanted to become the drug dealer because I remember everything that I did to get the drugs. Mm-hmm. So I wanted somebody to be that way for me. I wanted to be the puppet master. I'm going to do the, you know, man with the gold makes the rules was my thought, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we got evicted and the sheriffs escorted us out as I'm sweating bullets because I had all these drugs and cash on me, I went and I stayed in this hotel for 8 months. And then I worked out of a couple of others in downtown San Jose. And something happened at that hotel that I can't remember, but I ended up at the Crestview Hotel in Mountain View. And I was there for about 3 or 4 months, and then I got raided. And I was in trouble. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that they'd been watching me for a while, and so when I got arrested, I'd probably been up 7 or 8 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I did that. That was my MO. I'm like the longest I ever stayed up was 14 days in a row one time. And
that makes you seriously crazy, right?
Yeah.
What happens to you when you're up for 14 days?
Well, I made a lot of money, but I mean, it was just insane, right? I mean, it was just absolutely insane. I mean, you know, I used to throw vacuum cleaners at Kathy, and just, you know, just bad things, right, would happen. And
would you hallucinate? Do you hallucinate at that point?
Well, I don't know if it was a hallucination or not. Like, I don't know. I couldn't tell the reality from anything, right? But
couldn't decipher.
But I was doing whatever I was doing, right? And then I would just crash in a chair. And I do remember it was during this time where I'd stay up 3 or 4 days, and if I could make it to 7, it would just play out. But when I would wake up, I would just cry because I didn't want to wake up, right? I wanted to die.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the first thing I would do is I'd hit a bottle of Jim Beam, and then I would smoke some meth, right? And so when I got arrested in Mountain View, I fell asleep at the main jail in San Jose, and I woke up in a pool of my own piss because I couldn't wake up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many days I'd been asleep. I don't know what I'd missed. I don't know anything. But these guys had woke me up, and they were like, "Dude, you're a mess. You look at," and it was a pool, not just like I was soaked, but it was like a pool. So I don't know what happened. Mm-hmm. But there was some good guys in there, and they helped me get cleaned up. And then
in jail,
mm-hmm, okay. Which is weird, but I don't know. You know, something was looking after me, right? And so they helped me out, and then I got bailed out. Some guy that I had dealt drugs to bailed me out, and I went over to another hotel across kind of kitty corner. It's called the Zico now in Mountain View, and 4 or 5 days later, after I got out on bail, I got arrested again for the same thing. And I had drugs. I had a 1/4 ounce of crystal meth. I had like almost a half gallon of GHB in the fridge. I had a couple ounces of weed. I had a bottle of Jim Beam.
That's a lot.
I had some ketamine. And so I just had all this stuff going on. And the reason they came in was because I always put the do not disturb sign on the door because I knew what I was doing in there. I didn't this day for whatever reason.
Oh, shit.
And when I fell asleep, she knocked on the door, but I couldn't wake up.
The housekeeping?
Yeah. And so she couldn't wake me up when she came in. And so she freaked out and called an ambulance. The ambulance came in there. They saw what was in there. And when I woke up, I was on the gurney and the cops were in there. And I knew I was in trouble. I mean, I just was like, shit. And so I started to formulate this real quick, plan, right? I said, hey, can you guys do me a favor and look in that drawer? There should be like $7,000, and there was nothing in there. And I knew that. And they said, there's nothing in there. I said, oh my God, I've been robbed. And somebody's planting these drugs here. And by then they knew that I had just got arrested, right? And the same, for all that stuff. And the guy was like, you're done. You're fucking done, right? And I'm handcuffed to the gurney, and and I had weapons, and so it was just a bad situation, right? And then they took me down to Mountain View.
Did you used to carry a gun all the time?
No, I didn't.
You just had it?
I didn't have to because like some people that I would hang with would, and so I had like weird relationships. Like I hung out with some guys and would do things for them every once in a while. But
are you sure you want to say that on a bike?
They were cool, right?
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
they were good to me, and we had good relationships. I mean, but I think they knew that I was fucked up, and they just eventually distanced themselves, right? Yeah, because I was a truck. And
where did the guns come from?
I just knew people. I mean, it was just.
So they just left them at your hotel?
Sometimes.
Okay.
So I mean, I used to have this business card that would say, "What you need," and it would have my phone number.
Wow.
And because I felt like I could get anybody anything.
Okay.
And that's what I would hand people.
Got it.
And so I got taken down to Mountain View Jail, and Sergeant Barcelona, who arrested me on my 13th time, was there, and he lost his shit because he didn't think I was going to get out, and I did. And yelling at me, I can't fucking believe you got out. I'm going to make sure you go to prison for fucking, forever. And then off I went, right? And I was in trouble. Yeah.
That's scary. Okay, so he's going to make sure that you're going to go to jail or prison.
Yeah, he was going to make sure I wasn't going to bail out. That's for sure.
Okay, and so what happened after that?
I went to my bail hearing, and they made it $500,000.
Okay.
So I wasn't getting out.
Okay. And so so you never went to jail, though?
I did.
Oh, you went to jail? How long were you in jail for?
They gave me a county year, which is 10 months, 20 days. And
like a baker's dozen? What is a county?
So
okay.
County year is different, and if you go to court and then they say you're gonna go to jail for a year and a day, you go to prison. But if you go for a year, you stay in county.
Okay.
So I was able to do the time that I needed to do there. I got involved in a program, RCP, which is kind of a paramilitary style. We marched and saluted the guards, and very weird, very humbling. But it, believe it or not, it kind of gave me the structure that I needed. I mean, to just.
Oh, hell! It was helpful for you.
In a way,
okay.
It was. I mean, but there was just as much. There was a lot of gang members in there. There was a lot of grab ass. I saw somebody get jumped. And
what does that mean? Jumped?
He was in the shower, and like 3 guys went in there and beat him up, and because there's shower stalls on one side, shower stalls on the other, and the rule was just one at a time, and you just put the towel over to let people know that you're in the shower, don't come in. And when I was getting out, I opened the curtain, and as soon as I did, 3 guys ran into the other one across from me, and just did what they did, and ran out, and oh, okay. I mean, it just that's where I am, right? So just kind of.
That's scary.
Sorry, man.
You're like,
I did. I went right to my bunk. I was like, it's none of my business.
Right.
Can't help you.
Oh, that's scary.
It sucks.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so so you were there for 10 months?
Well, I got in that program, so it got me out of there early.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And what happened after that?
I went to an SLE.
Oh, you went from there to the SLE? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
You
told I've heard you tell the story about how like you get out and you have like almost no money.
Well, I had nothing.
They don't like turn you loose with a little money?
No, that's in prison. I mean, you get you get gate money.
Okay.
But no, not in county jail. You don't get shit. So, so I just...
You have no money, no friends, no place to go.
Well, I had that marriage. Right. Well, I was holding on to that while I was in there because I needed something, right? And so my hope is that she would get sober too. You know, and meanwhile, my mom had been visiting me, and she had been, you know, putting money on my books and really supportive, and you know, and that was a rough, you know, but before I had surrendered, right, and my mom had came to visit me that day that I had my bail hearing, and as I'm coming from Palo Alto back to Milpitas, I'm thinking I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of California. I'm going to go to prison for a long time, and but I knew my mom was going to come see me, and so I started to come up with this pitch, and you know, when they called me, they put me in the ankle chains and the hip chains, and they shuffled me down this hallway, and when we picked up the phones, because we were on monitors, you could feel the tension immediately, right? And I started, right? Hey, Mom, look, you heard $500,000, but listen, I got to get out of here to prove that I haven't done anything, right? Because Kathy set me up. All these guys out here have been plotting against me, and now they did this. And you think the detectives are going to try to... I have to get out to show that I did not do this, right? And I mean, I'm... You know, and so... she said, well, what are you saying? I said, I need you to bail me out. And she said, $500,000, I can't do that. I won't, no. And I said, well, put up your house. Yeah, and so me telling her to put up her house, I knew I was going to leave as soon as I got out, right? So she would have been holding the bag on that $500,000.
She would have lost her house?
Yeah. She would have been responsible for paying for it, right? And she would have put up her house. They would have, I don't know what they would have done, but it was not going to be my problem. And she said no. And so when she said no, it's this crazy tidal wave of emotions came, and everything that I had learned in all the treatment facilities I had been in, all the counseling sessions I had been in, all those fancy words I unleashed on her, you know, abandonment issues. You're the reason why I'm in here. You know, you left me, and I was telling her to fuck off. I called her the C word. I called her everything, and then I flipped her off, and I was hanging up the phone, and as the tears were streaming down her face, I saw her mouth the words, right? You know, why are you doing this? You know, I was scared, right? I was scared. And so, because now I have no way to get out. And so as I'm shuffling down the hallway, it dawned on me for just like 1 second, how the fuck did that just happen from that little kid that was 13 with Mike Jones? How, right? And I was so scared, and I didn't know what to do, and I finally surrendered a couple of days after that. That's my sobriety date.
Wow. And
so when I got out and I didn't have nothing was better than what I had going in. Because I was going out with a little bit of hope.
Wow.
Now, right?
Yeah,
and I was flying on that, right? And it's like I had a lot of hoops to jump through, but it's as if the chains had really been released. And that's a hard thing to understand for people sometimes, but...
unless you've been through it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm walking out of there and I'm scared. You know, my mom... Even after that, my mom had come and visited me. And I remember our first visitation, that I could hold her. And you could only hug her for a little bit. And I believe that, like, all moms have a certain smell. That's just a animalistic kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I held her, and it was like my mom had that smell, and I cried, and it's like all that terrible stuff that I had said to her and done to her through childhood. I mean, just like I couldn't believe that this woman was still there to see me. And then when they left, I got strip searched, right? And the reality hit again of where I was. And so it's like little moments of those carried me through. And getting out, I didn't know what was in store for me, but I was leaving a different man.
Wow.
You know, so.
Yeah. That was big. Thank you for sharing that. So, okay, so this was the beginning of everything being different, right? So you make it to, how did you even know to go to an SLE?
There was a guy in my pod that had talked about New Life recovery. Mm-hmm. And I heard him talking about it, and I asked my parents if they would, or my mom and Richard, if they would look into that for me. And so they did. Okay. And Kevin Richardson is probably one of the biggest reasons why I didn't go to prison. They were, in my heart, I felt like they were going to sentence me, because a bail enhancement, like if you're on bail and you get arrested on bail, that's a mandatory 2 years in prison. So on top of the 5 felonies and then the 7 felonies from the third, so, but he took the judge and the chambers, and they came back out, and the judge said, I'm going to give you one chance. And so, we went through this whole thing, and then I got involved with New Life, and this man came to pick me up, and I went to their pink house down by the main jail there, and I signed my 6-month deal, right? Mm-hmm. And
contract.
Yeah, just saying I'll stay there, and they took me to the SLE, and the weirdest thing happened to me.
SLE being
sober living environment, and it chokes me up thinking about it, because I can remember the feeling of sitting on the bed, being scared, but realizing at that moment that I hadn't taken anything. I was sober, and the 13 times before that, I was not sober, but I was standing in the light of the sunlight of the Spirit in a fucking SLE, scared but sober, right? And I knew that there had been a shift, and I like to think of it as if I looked at a scale and I had always teetered on 50-50, sober life or fucking let's try to shoot another angle life, and I was finally 51% sober.
Okay.
And that's all I needed was that 1%. Yeah. It's the first time I'd ever experienced, and that 1% felt like 1,000, and it was just enough to get me there and keep me. Yeah. And I haven't gone. There's just never again. Never.
How long ago was that?
2004.
Long time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, July 2004.
So you got into the program, we'll just call it a 12-step program early on. And can you just walk me through like the progression of, because it doesn't sound like you grew up with any kind of church or higher power or anything.
We went to church.
Did you?
Yeah, and I don't know. I felt like it was more of a social thing, because we would always go to breakfast afterwards. Mm-hmm. So it was just one of those things that, I mean, my folks tried to get me involved in youth groups and things like that, and it wasn't bad, it wasn't good. I just didn't have any fond memories of it, but right. I didn't go kicking and screaming. I believe in God, right? Yeah. I believe in a power. I mean, something happened. I mean, I couldn't deny what had happened to me on that bed, right? I could not deny it, because I asked for help when I was in jail, and it didn't come in the form of a light bulb, but it came in the form of R.J. Bean, right. Curtis, Kenneth Love, and, those people that carried the message into me when I was in jail, those were the thunderbolts, right?
Right.
And
God works through people.
Something was. So for me to deny it, I mean, I was totally open. I had been exposed, and it's as if that fucking sliver of glass got removed from my heel. Yeah. And I could walk again.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to walk.
Yeah.
But the people in the program taught me.
Yeah.
And I started my journey, right? And they told me to get a sponsor. Uh-huh. And I did.
How did you pick your sponsor?
Well, my first one was this program that I was in would have outside speakers come, and then they would have alumni come, during the lunch, because we'd have meetings, and this guy came, and they knew him, and he had 5 years of sobriety, and he was a manager of an SLE, and he'd gone to prison, and I was like, that guy is right up my alley. And so I said, hey, would you be my sponsor? And he goes, sure. But he was this call me every day for 30 days guy, right?
Right.
So I called him every day, and he'd never pick up his phone, and it was strange to me, and I didn't know to ask anybody, like, is this weird? Why is this, but
why did he ask me to call him? I'm never going to answer the phone.
So I'm like, okay, I'm calling you again, just checking in. Okay, I'll talk to you later. And then he came and he chaired a meeting at this program, and he started off with, I just want to talk about how, mad I am at this guy that I know, and I have a gun in my car, and I feel like if I see him, I'll shoot him.
Oh my God.
And probably won't, but I'm just saying, and I'm thinking, now I had been going to meetings for just a little while, and I heard in the rooms, if you want what we have, do what we do.
Uh-huh.
And I knew at that exact moment I wanted nothing that this guy had, right?
Okay.
Because if that's what 5 years of sobriety looks like for him, I don't want that. Yeah. That's not what I want, right? And
that is not the goal.
And
you can do better.
Right. And that talk that he was spewing is what I was trying to get away from, because that's what I lived in when I was out there,
That's unusual.
And so after our program, I called him because I knew he wouldn't pick up, right? So I felt safe, like, I think I'm going to go in another direction here, right? Mm-hmm. And it was on a Wednesday, and I went to the Alano Club, and Big Chris, he was chairing, and it wasn't anything that he said. He was just dumb luck. He was just speaking, right? And I knew just something in me said, okay, you got to find somebody else. Even if he's another, call me every day for 30, then I'll start over, whatever, right? And so I went up to him and I said, see, now I was scared because of this guy, right? So I said, hey, do you have any room on your plate? And he said, I don't know what the hell that means, but here's my phone number. And he wrote it on my bus schedule. And he gave it back to me, and he said, call me if you need anything. And the next day I called him, and I said, hey, I need a sponsor. And he said, good. And I said, okay, hang on. Will you be my sponsor? Right? And he said, yeah, let's meet, and we'll talk. And then we decided on a day we were going to meet. And it was at the Alano Club in Willow Glen. And that started my relationship with him as a sponsor, and now we're like best friends.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He was on the podcast.
Yeah, I heard him.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he's a
great guy.
He is.
Yeah, he's very kind, and
he's what I wanted to emulate.
He's a gentleman.
And everything, because what I saw was the way that women felt safe around him.
Yeah.
And I heard a lot of women. I used to mug women, and I beat them and took their purses, and I didn't know if I could ever be that, right? And I asked him how he did it, and he said, well, you should become friends with a woman that you want absolutely nothing from. And so then I met Kathy Z.
Oh, yeah.
And she kind of became my little gal, and I looked up to her, and she had a lot of time, and I drifted towards her, and her husband, Patrick, they were always good to me, and and I just watched Chris, right? I mean, I'm a big believer in anybody can shoot off their mouth in a meeting, but I could tell there was something about Chris that was genuine, right? And I saw what he did, and I saw how the way people looked at him, and I just, it's just like I felt so safe around him, And after I read, did my fifth step with him, he told me that I was a good man.
Aww.
Nobody's ever told me that, right? Yeah. And he still tells me, and it still gets me, when he does that. Because I know it's coming from a genuine place. Mm-hmm. And, even somebody saying that to me that knows all my shit.
Yeah. Well, in the absence of the drugs and alcohol, I mean, we are different people. There's a reason why drugs and alcohol drugs are illegal, right? It's because it turns us into monsters. Mm-hmm. But if you remove that, if we take away all the bad, what's left?
Right.
It's all the good, and it's so important, and it's to have somebody in your life who can see that.
It took a long time for me to find that good.
Yeah, it does take a long time.
Chris had to keep telling me, just because you're sober doesn't mean that you're a doormat.
Right.
Because I would, I let people walk all over me because
you're paying for your past.
Yeah, I felt like I deserved it.
Right.
And so. It's like so many things were tugging at me to get off center.
Right.
And it still happens, right? But sure. I'm just, now I've got a stronger center, right? And it wouldn't take much for somebody to just go boop, and then I'm like, oh, and I'm reeling, Now I'm a little more, my core is a little stronger, and I can get tugged, but I'm not falling anymore, and that's through a lot of work, and a lot of heartache, and a lot of sadness, and a lot of loss, and a lot of fear, and a lot of I don't run from fear like I used to. I've developed this whole thing to where I kind of talk to my fear now. I feel like if I'm in fear, I go, wow, there's some fear. What's going on? And I seriously have this breakdown with myself. And the reason I like doing that is because when I'm feeling fear, that means that I'm alive. Oh. Because that's what I was drinking at.
Right, you were
I didn't feel it before, right? And so now that I feel it, I don't push it away. I'm like, okay, let's talk. Let's figure this out, right? It's and
you're coping with your feelings.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
And when I know that I feel that, it makes me feel good that I can feel it.
Right.
Because I'm alive. I'm feeling something, right? And if I'm going to revel in this whole fucking, oh, it's a great day, my daughter's the best in my life, and da-da-da, well, then I should embrace the fear just as much, right? That's who I feel. I feel like there's a balance, right? Sure. I mean, I don't want to just, be so happy about all the wonderful things and then just, in such fucking utter, denial of what could happen on the other end. So I try to embrace everything, every bad feeling, every good feeling, no matter what, right? And then it's because I'm growing from both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know you to be a man of service. You really do show up for your friends and your family. And what drives your need to be of service? I really try to foster relationships with women, and not in a creepy way. So there's women that I beat and took their purses, and so to say that might land with you as in oh gosh, that's awful. And it is. But not only does that land with me when I say it, but I remember their face. I remember the terror in their eyes. And I don't know if they still think about that now, or if they drop something, I don't know if they had to go to therapy for it. I don't know if what, right? I don't know. And I could never make that better. And I will always have to do something to make that area of my life because that just weighs on me so much, right? And instead of letting it affect me in a negative way, it empowers me to try to do everything that I can, right? Okay. With being there for anybody without a motive, opening a door, buying somebody behind me their dinner if I see a woman with kids in the car, at the drive-thru, or their coffee behind me, or putting $50 at the fucking counter and saying, next coffees are in me, that's what I try to do. Women's shelter, donating to that, right? I mean, that work is never done, and so that just is the tremendous amount of wind in my sails on that front. I mean, because those are the memories that I have, right? And that I don't know if I want to shake those. Yeah, you can't make amends for those, but you can do the living amends.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's huge. Tell me what life is like now. I know you have some, you don't have to, share anything that you don't want to, but you have some good things in your life. I mean, your little girl, how old is Cassidy now? I mean, Bobby and I were there at the hospital when she was born, that little peanut. It's so cute. How old is she now? She's
6, going on 15. And, she just lights up my world.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like an extension of me, I mean, she makes me laugh, belly laughs, right?
She's funny.
Just her, she gives me side eye. That's so funny. She likes to just, we have WrestleMania. I mean, we have Thumb War. I mean, it's just she just keeps me going. And when she was born, Chris really made me aware that I have to work on not bringing baggage into that relationship, because I do have a 24-year-old that I never, was around for, right? And so even back to that living amends thing that you talked about just a minute ago, right? That's what I get to do through Cassidy.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we just FaceTimed the other night, the three of us, and we laugh and we, check in with each other, and and it's a good deal. But yeah, that's my life now. That's just, I mean, one of many, right?
Yeah.
I've been on this crazy little gratitude thing, and it started about a week and a half ago because I work in Mountain View, and taking 85, right? I call it Hell Drive, and
we call it traffic.
Nice. And so it's not that somebody cut in front of me because I get it, but it's just I just am blown away by the traffic, right? And so I was by myself. I said, "This fucking traffic," right, out loud, and I'm by myself. But then, not a second after I said that, I remember sitting at a bus stop when I just got sober. I would have given my left arm to have what I have now back then, and now I have it. Right? I have a license. I have a job to go to. I have a car. I have insurance. I have, a daughter. I mean, I have everything. I have the same phone number that I've had since I got sober. I've gotten every deposit back on every place that I've lived in. Right? Right? I mean, I've got my record expunged in California. Right?
Wow.
I mean, but so it's just all these. And I've got friends that I can text, and so I've been texting some friends, and as I'm texting them, I'm crying because I can't believe that I have people to call and text that I love, and they love me back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna fucking traffic? No, I'm not. Right? Right? I'm not.
Yeah.
Not. I mean, I probably will again, but yeah. I'm just.
We are human.
Right. I mean, but I'm glad that I have the ability to jerk that back into the lane that I need to be in.
Right.
You know. And again, I feel like that's the thing tugging at me to get off center. Right. And it's no longer the overpowering presence that it used to be.
Right. Well, we are human. I mean, I've been sober a long time, and sometimes people and you've been sober a long time, and sometimes it's like the newcomers or whatever think that maybe you are expected to not be human anymore, not get pissed off in traffic, or if you're not, there's something wrong with your program. It's like, you know what? I'm just a fucking human.
Right. I learn more now in sobriety from the people that go through it than I do from the people that just stand up and talk about, I believe in talking about success stories. I love it. I mean, it makes me, record expunged. Yay. Our 12-step program is the only place where I know if somebody stands up and talks about they got their driver's license, they're going to get applause, right? Right. So tell that to your coworkers. They're going to look at you like you have a third head, right? But at the same time, when people go through things and I see how they did it, that brings me so much hope and it gets me out of myself because I want to see if I can help. It's I lost my eye.
Yeah.
And people have called me and told me, you're walking through this wonderfully, and but it's like, what am I going to drink? No.
What choice do I have?
I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago, and I shared with it at a meeting. If I drink, then I would be like a one-eyed guy in prison. And that's a bad thing to happen. I'd have to walk against the wall on the right side because I wouldn't know it's coming on my right side. I don't want to. No, that's a no.
No, thank
you.
No
more.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened? That was a crazy situation.
Yeah. 4 or 5 years ago, I was noticing at the computer my vision was kind of blurry, and I went to this optometrist, and he's like, your eye's kind of moving, it's weird, I don't know, but we'll get you some glasses. And he just kind of diagnosed it, but it just kept on, something was bad, and then I would look in the mirror and it would start to kind of move to the corner of my eye.
On the outside or the inside?
To the outside, right? But then I could always bring it back. I'd go, whoa, and then we'd go, rink.
Oh my God.
And so eventually it got bad enough to where it just stayed over there. And we did all these tests. I went to this nerve doctor. He took 21 vials of blood, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with me. I went to Stanford. They were just stuck. They did not know. So eventually,
you were at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, I was. They were really perplexed on what is, sorry, but just, so I had a patch and the whole deal. And one day we were driving up to Sacramento for dinner, and my left eye started to do that same stuff and it was freaking me out. And I got to Sacramento, and I called my doctor at Stanford, and she said, you need to get to the hospital. And so I've always been, Chris always talked about a dilemma. A dilemma is, where you have two options and neither one of them is very good.
Yeah.
And now I'm in Sacramento with my eye kind of going wonky, and I don't know what to do. So don't want to go to the hospital in Sacramento and then be stuck there. How am I going to get back? So I drove back. and I went to, then I made it to the hospital, and some intern had asked me if I had ever been checked for Lyme disease or syphilis. And I said, I don't know. They took 19 fucking vials of blood. I would hope they did. And when they admitted me, he took my blood, and they released me 3 days after, and then they were going to have me come back. And turns out that it was syphilis.
Oh, motherfuckers.
So they didn't test for that when I didn't need the eye patch, and so I don't know if it would have been fixed, but they fed me, pumped a bunch of penicillin in me, and it fixed the left eye. So it saved that one. But the right one.
You lost your right eye.
Because since it had stayed over to the corner, we had done 4 surgeries where they were trying to attach muscles to it.
4 surgeries you had on that eye?
Yeah, 3 or 4, and then they tried to straighten it out. But then once they got it at least straight, there was still a tremendous amount of double vision, and they thought, well, we can just put glasses on there. But what they didn't realize is that the third nerve also controls the eyelid, and so that's why my eyelid is completely down, and they would have had to raise it, but if they raised it, I wouldn't be able to blink. So then I would have just putting eyedroppers in my eye all the time. And if I would have slept, my eyelid would have been open. I'd have been looking like a big freak ball. So whoever sleeping next was going to look like, you know what I mean? Could you imagine? Yeah, really. I mean, literally. And so that's just so freaky. And so, it was just...
You would have been Eyedropper Brian.
Right, exactly. That would have been my name. Excuse me, hang on. But it just, and then they gave me the choice to try to do that, that's not a way. And so I've just been having it down long enough, and just, it is what it is, whatever, fuck, I don't care. I mean, kids freak out on it, and I'm like, like, what? Oh yeah, they're like, what happened? I'm like, too many sweets, right? And then they're, what? Or I tell them, because I didn't eat my veggies, me and Cassidy have this whole thing. My daddy didn't eat his veggies or drink his milk. So
it's a good thing you guys can laugh
try
about
to take
it.
the power out of it. Yeah, I mean, it sucked, but I mean, it's just, again, I've heard other people in the rooms talk about worse.
I know.
And it's just like, how could I ever, I just can't imagine.
It's all perspective, right? And you have a choice about how you want to look at it. So you're choosing to look at it. That's awesome. We're wrapping up on our time. Before we do, though, I know you do a lot of service, but and you sponsor other guys. Like, do you have a process of how you sponsor?
Yeah, the same way that Chris and I did it. I mean, we meet once a week, read a chapter a week, and check in. I tell them what meetings I go to, and if they go to those meetings, that'd be awesome to see them there. But they should probably go to meetings. I've really taken a page out of the book from Chris that I don't tell them what to do. Chris never told me what to do. I just showed up when he said I'll be here, and but I also hit our scheduled time that we had allotted for ourselves. And then we read a chapter a week, and then when we get to a step in the book, we take it. And so 3rd step, we kneel down and say a prayer, and then they have 2 weeks to do their 4th step.
Oh, you give them a time limit. Oh, that's smart.
Yep. And then I tell them the same thing that Chris told me on the 5th step. You don't have to share it with me, but you need to share it with someone, right? Because whoever you want to. It's not my pride or ego, but please share it. Because Chris told me at the beginning when we first started reading, I didn't trust anybody, but he had told me that, while we go through this process, I'm going to share some things with you, and you might share some things with me, and I'm going to tell you now that nothing will ever leave this, right? And I trusted that. So I try to establish that same kind of, framework with the guys that I have the honor of working with too. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But if we get through the steps, great. If we don't, great. I mean, and
let's hope he stays sober.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I love it. I mean, I do. It's just, it's given me these connections and enriched my life. Like I couldn't, ever imagine. Right. And Chris is just such a non-ego kind of person, and that's why I love working with, Neil now but we're doing a little something different, and we're really, I'm starting to find where that pebble landed in the pond, right? I'm finding out, and that's wonderful work. And I love the work. I love the growth. I love the stubbing my toe a lot, because that just, to me, that means that there's work. And I love it. I do. I really, truly enjoy the work, because I've seen what happens when I do the work.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and I know what it feels like. And so growing pains or not, I love it.
Something magical on the other side of that.
It's like, it's crazy. I feel like I'm sitting not at the table yet, but I'm seeing the universe set the table for me.
What does that mean?
Anytime I think something can't get better, something else comes along and it's better, right? And I know that I haven't had my best day yet. And as I sit on the outside of this table, it's like the universe is putting down a teacup and a salad fork. And every once in a while, I plop up to that table and I get to enjoy it. And I'm like, fuck yes, this is awesome. Whatever's happening, I'm just soaking it all in. But then again, every once in a while, I push myself away from the table and I just kind of watch it. And it's unfolding in front of me. Right. And it's taking a long time, but I know it's happening. I know it is. I know it's happening because I'm watching it. And it's my decision to join it.
Right.
It's my decision, right? I have that option. And nobody can stop me from taking that step towards that table, pulling out the chair and sitting down by myself and enjoying it, right? And those pieces of flatware, of cutlery, of a tablecloth can be people in my life that is sitting at the table with me. My daughter, Heather, you, Bob, Arlina, my mom, the conversation I had with the lady at the pharmacy. All these things play a part of this wonderful thing that's unfolding in front of me every day. And so the longer I can sit at the table, I get to enjoy more of it. But when I'm not at the table, I still get to enjoy watching it kind of happen. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so great. So usually the way I wrap up the podcast, since it's one day at a time, do you have a daily process or a weekly process that you go through, like a routine, habit, anything that helps you to stay sober?
Morning masturbation helps. What?
That's not totally serious.
It's not approved.
Listen, if that's your thing, that's your good time. Anything else?
No, that is the only thing that I do consistently on a daily basis.
Release the poison.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we're doing it. You know what? I'm consistent in a lot of things, and then my consistency will shift over to another thing to be consistent about. But I'm always being consistent about one thing at a certain point, right? So right now, I've been consistent about getting up in the morning, getting myself ready for bed to go to work, and I started making my bed again.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I read that it's like if you don't do anything, there's that, at least you did that, right?
Yeah.
And so before I go to work, I'll pour my coffee and I light that piece of wood. And
it's like an incense.
Yeah. Yes. And they don't know what I'm talking about because right, it's a piece
podcast.
of wood. See,
right.
Your next thing should be video, podcast, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. Yeah.
So I light that piece of wood that's kind of like an incense, and I burn it, and I do just like a 38-second centering.
Okay. Why 38?
Because it's a guided one. And I just listen. It's the same guy, and he centers me, and it's 38 seconds.
Okay.
And then that lasts till I probably hit my driveway, but at least I do it right. And I can be good until I hit that 4-way stop sign with people like, "Go, fucking you go," and then I hit 85, and then it can start. But I'm going to a meeting though.
Okay.
Every morning, I consistently hit a meeting in Palo Alto before I start my day. So I do that so I can beat that traffic. Because I figured if I get my lazy butt up and go to a meeting to avoid traffic, and there's a meeting there, I can avoid it. But there's no way avoiding it back here, So at least, But I get a meeting and it's a great group. And,
okay, very cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
good job.
Oh, thank you.
All right, well, listen, we'll go ahead and in there. I want to tell you that That guy you were talking about that robbed women and stuff, I don't know who that person is. It's like the Brian that's sitting before me, I think is a beautiful person. I am so grateful to have you in my life, and you bring so much joy to my family, and I know that you love my boys. I have had you babysit my boys when they were little. So I am so grateful to you for the work that you've done and for the people that you help and for the podcast today. I really feel like your message is going to go far and wide, and I just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
No, thank you. I love you.
That's a wrap.
Yay!